Well, welcome to Star Lane, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for coming. For about the past 4 weeks, or I guess in this case it's been since school started, so I guess 5 weeks this time, me and these other students have spent a lot of time in this room with Mr. Russell talking about the Muddy Mountain Multiple Uses Area and natural fragmentation, contiguous environment, and loads of other stuff. So I guess we'll just go around and introduce ourselves. I'm Eli Velasquez.
I'm Luke Fox. I'm Angela Reynolds.
I'm Isaac Lee.
I'm Riley Beck.
I'm Deanna Grant.
I'm Jacob White.
And I am Adam Coolidge.
Alright, now that we're off and rolling, Joe's going to come up here and talk to you guys for a little while.
Yay. Hello. As I mentioned before, I am Angela Reynolds, and I'm going to explain what a coordinated resource management is and how we use it in this problem. A coordinated resource management is a process that helps people manage natural resources in a productive, environmentally friendly, and economical manner. Or in this case, it would be the stakeholders such as the BLM, the state of Wyoming, and private landowners. You see, this is the CRM process. This process involves the stakeholders to make decisions by consensus rather than by traditional voting and majority rule, in which it would have the BLM, state of Wyoming, and private landowners of the Muddy Mountain included in this CRM process. And why this would be called on is because this is one way to deal with a situation of great importance. Although all participants may not agree 100%, in which with the rules of no vote makes the group collaborating until they can come to an agreement. I have one more note card explaining how great the CRM is. The CRM is ultimately flexible. It works at a variety of solving issues. So if I were to explain on how the CRM is being used on the subject, the idea of it would either be like the state asking the private landowner, Russell Gordy, to let hunters hunt on his land so they don't overpopulate, or Russell Gordy asked the BLM to use a better solution of pine beetle control. And the BLM would tell the state that an area is being closed off to the public and has to agree. One way or the other, this will be figured out. Now I will be passing it off to Isaac Lee and Riley Beck, covering on the habitat of Muddy Mountain.
Hello, as mentioned before, I'm Isaac Lee, and I'll basically be breaking down the ecosystem of Muddy Mountain for you. There are several large animals and small animals on the mountain. One of the main focuses being elk and mule deer. Elk are in the family Cervidae, and they're extremely populous on the mountain. They range anywhere from 300 to 800 pounds and are around 4 to 5 foot at the shoulder height. They cover a large amount of the mountain and are least concern on the conservation status. And lodgepole trees are the most populous tree on the mountain. However, they've been deeply afflicted by pine beetles. And most of the trees are still in a large population. However, due to overpopulation by the elk, aspen clones are being eaten, and the limber pine, which once held a good range on the mountain historically, has been pushed to the very rim of the mountain due to the pine beetles. And the area that we're focusing, or that we did focus on, was mainly it was forested areas with sort of meadows surrounding the forested areas, and the shrubs and grasses in these areas make up a big diet for several of the animals on the mountain. And sagebrush is a huge contender on the mountain, as you can see, holding over 17,219 acres of land on the mountain. There aren't any really major ponds or rivers on the mountain. However, there are streams on the mountain. There are 4 notable streams in the area, those being the Pitch Pine Creek, the Big Red Pine Creek, Muddy Creek, and Big Red Pine tributary. Other streams on the mountain run off to either the south or the east of the mountain, but these are the main streams. There are also a few springs on the mountain, however, they're not extremely notable. And this is Riley Beck talking to you about the press.
I'm Riley Beck. I'm mostly talking about the animals on the mountain, types of birds that they have. Oh, there's lots of other types of birds. These are the birds that we're actually focusing on mostly. There's eagles, hawks, falcons, vultures, and grouse. Grouse, blue grouse and sage grouse are great indicator species, meaning that their absence or presence will show how the ecosystem is almost as a whole. Alright, human pressures applied to the elk are recreation, hunting, and a lot of other things. But what that does is it stresses the elk out a lot, and it dysfunctions them, like it screws up their survival rate, screws up their reproductive success, and talking about mostly trees, but the aspen, there's a community aspen on the mountain that is being demolished by the elk because the humans are pushing them all into one area and they're overeating that land. So the land that's getting, all the elk are eating in that little area it doesn't have enough time to recover from being eaten. So, and that's most in the area it has is the budget aspen. They like to eat the bark of the immature aspen and the tops of immature aspen. They like the aspen because of the cover, the nutrition, and because they can eat it in the winter and fall. Here's some facts about elk in the family survey, meaning that they have antlers that shed in the months of February to April. Though that's caused by osculate forming in the junction of their skull and their antler until all the calcium gets absorbed by these osculate and until it just falls off because it's too weak. They're crepuscular, meaning they're most active in the morning and evening. They're grazers and browsers. Grazing is the consumption of grass and forbs, and they do that in the spring and summer, and they're browsers in the fall and winter, meaning that they'll eat tree bark and shrubs. They're gregarious, means they tend to hang out in groups. These groups vary during the months, because in the winter and fall, they'll usually be with all males. The male will be with all males, and in the summer and spring, they're polygynous, so they'll have the one male usually have 5 females. And I pass it off to Adam for fragmentation.
Okay, so fragmentation is when the land becomes discontiguous. So in some cases, there's human fragmentation and natural fragmentation. So in this case right here, there's been a road or pathway that's been built, and it fragmented this forest so that the land is no longer contiguous, and animals are more reluctant to pass through fragmented areas. So the two main types of fragmentation are natural fragmentation and human fragmentation. So there's many types of natural fragmentation, such as pine beetles, fires, drought, invasive species. So this picture shows you an area that's been devastated by a fire, and it also shows an area that's been taken out by pine beetles. Okay. So, in most cases, natural fragmentation is temporary, which means the land will regenerate and the nutrition has been restored to the soil generally. So human fragmentation can be temporary, but it also can be permanent. So when an area has been fragmented and it's only temporary, succession will come in. So in this case, succession is the order in which the plants grow. So generally smaller plants grow first, such as grasses and small forbs, and then small shrubs and bushes will take root. Then softer wood trees will actually take root, such as aspens and deciduous trees. Finally, the harder wood trees, such as pines and coniferous trees will take root. So this cycle, it can vary, but it generally starts with small plants, and then the plants get larger until they hit the climax, which is when either the land regrows or the larger plants just continue growing. So then there's permanent fragmentation, which is when the land will not regenerate, such as when we build areas or remodel areas, because the nature itself cannot actually destroy roads unless it has a large amount of time. So the only way to really fix permanent fragmentation would for humans to go into the area and remove whatever's preventing the regeneration of the land, and then to help get plants in there to prevent erosion. And now Deanna with human fragmentation.
Hi, I'm Deanna Grant, human fragmentation. Fragmentation is due to natural disturbances. They can either be temporary or permanent. There's mainly disturbances in campgrounds, and there's quite a bit of disturbances in the campgrounds. Why the land becomes fragmented is because the humans, when the area and the land becomes disturbed, when the land becomes fragmented, the animals, they can become starved or dehydrated. What can be done? The BLM is going to try and close off some roads and some trails. They're going to try not have as many disturbances up in the Muddy Mountains. I have a picture of a trail and a picture of a road. Examples of the human fragmentation is when humans go off on their own little trails on four-wheelers, and also by oil rigs expanding on the mountain. That can also cause it too. Fragmentation is mainly caused by noises and such as off-roading that can cause the nature, like if an elk was going over there eating or whatever, and a four-wheeler goes over there and was eaten, and a four-wheeler would go over there, and then it would disturb them. But as the human was just passing through on a trail, it could still disturb them, but not as much as off-roading. I just have some pictures of the Muddy Mountain boundary, the Muddy Mountain Educational Area, and the Muddy Mountain Creek. And now I'm going to pass it off to Jacob White.
I'm going to be talking about one of the stakeholders, Russell Gordy, on Muddy Mountain, and he owns over 80,000 acres, or 8,000 acres on Muddy Mountain, and he's currently trying to swap land, like a small piece of land for more land, and he's the 56th largest landowner in the United States. And then the elk on Muddy Mountain like to travel to his land during hunting season because they know it's safer there, and he doesn't really hunt them as much as they would get hunted on other land. And then Russell Gordy owns 1/3 of the land on Muddy Mountain, and he doesn't let people hunt on his land, which is kind of okay, I guess, because it's his land. And then due to that fact, the elk have overpopulated and the vegetation has become slim. I will now pass this on to other topics. Thank you.
Now, my section of the presentation focused on what the BLM plans to do about these situations and what they have done in the past. Now, their duties consist primarily of management of native populations, monitoring of human activity, as well as invasive populations, and overall just maintaining a balanced and friendly ecosystem. Now, what's curious about the BLM is that it's actually a combination of two separate organizations. It was formed in 1946 and is a combination of the General Land Office and U.S. Grazing Service. And what it does, the majority of its land is currently owned in 12 western states. Now, I should explain that this map doesn't precisely represent the lands that they own, it just represents the percentages. As you can notice, they own the majority of their land in these 12 western states, including Alaska, as well as small parcels throughout the east. Now, what's curious about them is that they hadn't entered legislative mandate until the Congress enacted the Federal Land Policy and Management Act of 1976. Now, a lot of people, even within the BLM, don't quite know what this bill did or how it works today. But in ascension, it basically changed how lands administered by the BLM were managed. Congress recognized the value that public lands had, especially in the West, being that it had such a low population at the time. And they understood that they could be used for a variety of different recreational purposes, overall just for the public benefit of future U.S. citizens and the current ones. Now, of course, there are several other innumerable land management organizations, namely the National Park Service and the Fish and Wildlife Service, which are, just like the BLM, subsections of the U.S. Department of the Interior. They too manage certain aspects of the environment, especially in the western states, much like the BLM does. And the Forest Service is part of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And as its name suggests, it monitors tree populations, their health, how they can be used for arbor and agriculture. And now I shall pass this off to Eli Blastos for our plan.
All right, so before I talk about our plan, I just want to show you guys this map a little bit. So I believe, Angelo made this map for us, but the blue land is state in this, the yellow is BLM, and the white is private land. This chunk here is actually owned by Russell Gordy, and as you can see, there are parcels of state land which are completely surrounded and landlocked by his own land. And this kind of creates a problem for the state, as they cannot do anything with that land or provide access to it for public citizens. As a result of this, the land deal, which Gordy is currently attempting to put through, would see him kind of consolidate his land in the area, and there are a couple other places, and that would actually be good for both parties, as the state would then have access to the piece of land which they did own. So to our plan, it's kind of vital to understand that this is a multiple uses area. It's not a wildlife conservancy. Well, it's not a conservation area, it's not a ski resort. We have to balance the needs of people and the environment. So we can't just say all human interference is out of here, because as the land, especially the parcel right here, the BLM land, that has to be accessible to public citizens. We can't tell them they cannot be there. But one thing we can do to kind of control their habits is start blocking off roads and trails if we don't want them to go into places like that, and just make it harder for them to do things like this. But we do need the human presence there as a result of the growth of the elk. The elk population has been swelling pretty astronomically over recent years, and it's actually getting to an unhealthy point where it's bad for both the elk themselves, the environment, and people. So we would need to kind of boost the hunting tags for elk in this area and increase access to people during the winter months when the elk season is on. Speaking further to that, as you can see right here, as Jacob was talking about, the majority of the elk's winter range, which is represented by this green crosshatch, is within that private land, and Gordy doesn't allow a lot of hunting in there because he kind of likes it to be serene and everything within his area. So what we need to do is provide incentives for him and other private landowners to allow hunting on their land. We could do this either cash rewards for them, things like this, or just through the use of CRM. We could hopefully get them to compromise and realize that it's better for the environment if they let people hunt these elk rather than not. Alright, so we kind of want to be able to balance out the hunting on the BLM state and on the private land so that the elk didn't have this safe haven where they could just go in the winter and be without predation. Alright. We'd also want to control natural fragmentation such as the pine beetle infestations within the area. We talked a little bit earlier about the effect they've been having on limber pine, which is a very rare species, which has basically been pushed to where the remaining stands of limber pine are along that rim of the mountain and not in the interior anymore. So we want to be able to fight all kinds of diseases, not just the pine beetles, but also we want to be able to fight mistletoe and blister rust, other diseases within the flora of the area. We'd want to, of course, minimize or eliminate invasive species and noxious weeds, which is easier said than done. They don't have any natural, I don't know if you call it a predator for a plant, but nothing really eats them here. So that creates a problem for us. Cheatgrass actually will be eaten by elk for approximately a week. There's a period where it's edible to them, but after that it gets somewhat thistly and will tear up the insides of their mouths if they eat it. And the toadflax is just purely inedible. Another species which has had a lot of negative effect on the area, at least the part we saw, we did go up to the mountain on multiple occasions to kind of survey the land, see what was actually up there so that we were familiar with the land we were working with. And there have been a lot of cattle which have been illegally grazing in the riparian areas up there, grazing and browsing in the riparian areas. And as a result of this, the health of the riparian areas has been threatened. And we were talking earlier about how the elk really like to eat the aspen during the winter. They'll come in and browse on that. Well, there isn't very much aspen up in the Muddy Mountain area along the, in the BLM properties. And so if we could plant and raise new aspen clumps there, that's just one more reason that the elk would stay on that land during the winter, if we could even out the pressures of hunting and whatnot around them. All right, before we do the conclusion, we're going to talk to you guys a little bit about ArcMap 10, which is a part of ArcGIS, and it's what we use to make those maps. So Adam's going to talk to you guys about that for a little while. It's quite the program. It's
That's behind your work.
It's pretty, it's not all that complicated because we've been able to handle it and we're not exactly tech gurus. So,
I
they're
don't
doing a
need
good job
that.
of
I
making
need
this.
that.
Yeah, wiring.
Yeah.
So while Adam's getting this up, we were hanging out up on the mountain, like we were in here, I think, because this is where the multiple use area, the pagoda's like up in here, am I right?
The gazebo.
The gazebo, I call it the pagoda. And then we kind of hiked around down into here and overlooked some of the beaver ponds, which are not on.
They're pretty dried up.
What?
Oh, and it's
Okay.
weird because state land, they can actually allot it so that you can't go on it if they tell you not to, whereas BLM land you'll always have access to. They can like graze cattle on state land and tell you you're not allowed to go there.
Okay, so with ArcGIS, you can actually change things. Like I could add the roads that have been GPS into this area. So this black outline is the Muddy Mountain boundary area. So I'll take off that. And then I can add the elk habitat, which is considered the whole area. Well, it's other than winter. Also grazing allotments.
And we should mention that all this data is provided by the BLM to us.
Yes. What else? I can also add in the specific forested areas. I'll take off the ownerships. So I'll show you where some of the rare limber pines are. Oh, that's electrical. Okay, and then limber pine. so this is the main area where Limber Pine. Let's see that. So this is the main area that has Limber Pine right here. It's not a very large area, but there's still many trees left there. And also there's you can move the map up and find cities, and also add Lake Charles County cities. So Casper, Mills, and then I can also move up the layers. So I can move forests up above all of these. So now the forested layers will appear above these layers. Also, so as Eli said, this is all provided by BLM information. Also, if I want to be picky, I can do this and zoom to layer, and it'll zoom into the Muddy Mountain border area. And then also something you guys all know about the fire that happened.
Over these past couple of
So
weeks.
I'll put on ownership and take off forest again. So so the fire did have a bit of effect. It did go within the area of the Muddy Mountain area. So that is where the fire happened, within these points. So it did go onto the rim of the Muddy Mountain border, but not extremely far, where we had been working. So we had been working in this area, and it got into these areas. It got into this further part, more northern part. Also, you can go and change the mode setting. So this has a key, which I can go into legend, and I can edit it. If I don't want where the fires were, I just go like that. And then, so you can also make maps with keys, and you can put a north arrow on it.
There's some pretty cool north arrows.
Okay, so back to this setting. So, zoom. Also, I can do this, and then go to open attribute table. So this just tells you the acres in it, which is around 45,300.
Also, may I mention something that most of the stuff that's been taken and put onto that is actually typed by hand. So people who go out there to gather data about the land would actually have it recorded in their GPS, and as soon as they have it recorded, they can't plug it in, they can't automatically just go, okay, zoom. They have to type it in, and usually the columns that the attribute table hold up is about to fit that much. They all have to type that by hand.
So here's the forest attribute table, which as you can see is really long. So, yeah, so they work hard.
A couple other interesting layers that you can put in here are, you can actually add in, they have the goshawk nesting. Where's that?
And raptor nest.
Yeah, raptor nests. So you can see they're not very plentiful.
Properties, one moment.
But you can put in all kinds of cool things. We
So
have
now
a,
you can see the areas that have raptor nests.
did Robin Nelson work for the BLM or for?
I thought she worked for the
Game
Game
Fish.
Fish.
She worked for BLM.
Alright, well, we have one of the BLM ARC map people actually come in and give a talk to us about ARC map, and we were able to do some actually pretty awesome maps with it.
Yep, okay.
We also took about 5,000 pictures up there, but we deleted the cover slides, so none of them were actually in the presentation.
Oh, ouch. And I blame Russell on that point. Okay, so you can also add in the roads. And although actually these blue areas right here are where the streams are. And also there's townships, which are these areas, and then there's 36 sections within each township.
These ones are the weird looking ones, the sections up here, because they're each individual lots, or lots. I don't remember, but, they're not all the same size up in that northwest corner.
Can you put in the beaver ponds?
Eli, that's not northwest, that's northeast.
Is there a beaver ponds
Can you
there?
put up with the beaver ponds?
Beaver pond.
We mapped out, we GPSed a couple of the hikes we took so that we could locate, the beaver ponds and whatnot when we got back there.
No, there's no beaver
But-
pond.
We only have the GPS points on one of the computers and it's out there,
Is
so
there a
we
reason
might
for
still be
the
able to find it.
sections to be broken up like that?
It's, these sections here,
Yeah.
this is actually outside of the area where we were working, so,
It could also belong to the state, and when the state has lots like that, it'd either be for a real estate reason or just lots to
Private
buy.
land ownership and.
Yeah,
Maybe
it has to do with
grazing
the land
allotments.
ownership.
yes, okay, and that,
There is a big pond that my son would hike to, there's no trail, and I've gone with him several times. I wonder if it's on Gordy's land or it's very far east, and when you get down to, there's no trail or nothing, but it's huge. And you look up and there's a bluff of all rocks above it.
I think that's where you guys hiked that.
Did you hike down without a trail to a big pond? I mean, it's,
There was a trail from the majority of the way.
yeah, to
But-
the beaver ponds, there's trails, but not to this pond there. You have to push right through the woods to get down there.
I don't know if that's not.
And we were down there once, and my son fished there. There are some fish in it. And all of a sudden, there were 2 bullet shots, and they hit the pond. And somebody up on that rocky edge, which you could see, shot down there. And we got out of there so fast because it hit the water. And why were they shooting from, I don't think it's on Gordy's land, but it's very east of the Muddy
Hey,
Mountain.
you guys didn't go that far.
Alright, well,
This actually might, the beaver pond.
is there any?
West a little bit, Adam.
Is there any drilling locations anywhere on this mountain?
Anymore?
Isn't there
Drilling
a
location.
railway?
No, no.
There's no, records on the BLM or in this BLM folder, so we actually did not focus too much on oil wells. Oil
Right, so the oil and gas has no way to bother these elk if they're not even there.
The upperclassmen actually did the oil and gas problem.
fracking.
This-
Hydraulic fracturing.
Alright, well, if there's nothing else you want to show Adam, then
We can leave it up if you want.
Deanna up real quick.
You hiked into the beach.
Yeah, take it away.
Thank you for coming to Starling. We hope you enjoyed the presentation. Now that we have talked about the CRM, the human fragmentation, and the natural fragmentation, and about the BLM, now's the time for questions, and thank you.
So we can grill all of you.
Oh, what were those things?
Oh, yeah. Come on.
Alright, any questions?
I have a question. I never got, what's your name?
Bill?
Bill? Okay, cool. Sorry, I was being a curious guy.
Yes,
Yes, ma'am.
Talking about the elk and mule deer and what the elk eat. One place it said grasses and forbs. What are forbs? F-O-B-S.
Like flowers.
They're a small flower.
They're,
Just a small-
Like
they're
a-
small, plants that have leaves instead of blades, such as grass
like
has leaves.
Like,
But forbs are small plants, they're not woody like sagebrush, but they're small plants with leaves.
And
With a stem.
flowers?
They're like
and
a,
flowers?
it's a
clover.
plant that like
It's a type of
blossoms in
flower
the
patch
spring.
within-
Clover? Okay, I've
Yeah.
never heard of forbs before.
When we did the
I'm glad
prairie
you know.
dog
Yeah,
problem,
we learned a lot
You've
about
heard a lot about
prairie dog
it.
problem.
the prairie dog problem, we heard forbs like 1,000
Did
times.
BLM talk about the nature trail up there where there are lots of flowers and signs and
Neither of the people we talked to mentioned it.
So
It's a beautiful area to walk in the woods, and everything's labeled through the nature trail.
the BLM actually just kind of gave us information that we kind of needed. It's like they gave us information that we should.
And you never got up there, ever?
Not from what I've, no.
We went up
Too bad.
twice to the mountain, and then the fires broke out, and so a lot of our trips up there ended up
I
not
guess-
going on
That's
because of the fire.
I guess there's times to charm. That's all I gotta say. There's times to charm.
Do you know the population of this herd? How many elk are out?
Yeah, the population of it's over 1,200 at the moment.
Right, what would be a healthy population?
A healthy population anywhere between, I don't know, 20 and 600.
So 600, so
I mean, it depends on the size of the herd depends on how much vegetation there is for that herd to eat. So a healthy population could be 1 million if there's enough vegetation to.
There's not a lot
right, I
of
mean, but
vegetation
it's
over
at
there.
1,200.
They're
You're
overgrazing
saying
the
that
area.
They're overgrazing the
Yeah,
area, so
completely.
the
Looks like-
population needs to be cut down.
Yes, it does need to be cut down or
By
split
how,
out.
by asking by how much, I mean.
It's also,
So we should allow hunting in this area.
I
Yeah.
guess.
There are,
That's Gordy.
But it's Russell Gordy's land, and the only way we could provide, we couldn't, but the government or the BLM the state could provide incentives for these private landowners to let people hunt on their land. But at the current moment, they are not very excited about letting people hunt on their land.
I had a very unpopular idea though, which would solve that problem.
You lied.
We just introduced chronic wasting disease into the elk herd and let it kill a bunch of them.
It's also important to
No,
know.
no.
Miss Fox, I saw your hand.
Oh, I was wondering if Mr. Gordy's been presented with, this idea that it says he realized that the elk is being overgrazed on.
On that note, I believe that he notices that it is growing at an unhealthy population. So, in my opinion, honestly, in a certain area of what would be a healthy population of elk is either, I'll give you an example. The campground we went in, I kind of thought about it. There's a lot of fragmentation. There's a lot of trees that were going to be cut down and kept. And so I thought of this. When probably about 300 elk be able to survive on this certain area of land. And then I thought about it when I saw the map, bigger than I expected, honestly. Because seriously, when I saw the map for the first time, I was like, oh, we're dealing with that instead of this. And then it gave me an idea. It could probably range up from about 20,000 elk to probably 50.
It's also
Yeah,
important to note that the BLM's, that the elk are not at all a threatened species. The BLM's expectation for elk populations actually exceeds their expectations in many areas.
Also, the elk, the reason they're overpopulated is because they're not using the whole entire boundary of the Muddy Mountain area, so it's a fragmentation. They're getting compressed into smaller areas, and they can't travel to new areas with fresh nutrition and plants.
because of the human activity.
Another connection to the prairie dog problem last year. We found some data from, was it 2008 or 2009?
Which data?
Either way, there was some previous data from a couple years prior to our own problem to do with the prairie dogs. And we used the same piece of land to research on because in the previous years there had been these massive prairie dog towns. And when we went back the very first time, there was maybe 2 or 3 prairie dogs that we saw over the entire place. And there had been several hundred in the previous time. They'd been in a very concentrated area. And we inquired with the Game and Fish, the people on the land, and they told us that there hadn't been any poisonings, there hadn't been any shooting allowed on the area. They hadn't seen any of that going on outside of the law. There was another theory, which was that the plague did occur on Hat 6 Road at approximately the same time, and we're talking about up at, what's the name of the place?
Audubon Center.
Audubon Center. We're talking about up at the Audubon Center. So the fact that the which plague was, never mind.
Bubonic
Yeah, well, one of the plagues broke out within a prairie dog population out on Hat 6 Road. So there was a theory that that is what took out the prairie dogs, but my personal theory had always been that they kind of grew so big that they were no longer sustainable, and there was kind of a famine within the area because when we went up there, there was actually not that much vegetation anymore. And
Also,
as a result of that, that's kind of my theory about if we really could not work out a CRM, if you just wait long enough, the problem will resolve itself. Kind of a Taoist principle.
also there was actually, the plague had been cited at on both sides of the Audubon Center.
Any more questions?
I heard Gordy once, since he owns so much land, and he has game farms in different places on this land in the United States, that he doesn't want anybody hunting that area because he hopes to start game farms and have people come in and hunt and make more money that way. But that's, you know, really controlled hunting, but yet it's kind of sad that it's for really profit making.
Well, that's a theory, but based on some of the interviews that he's given to local newspapers from both Casper and Billings, Montana, he really does just like the land, and he doesn't want to have people out there shooting off their weapons because he's not exactly very social, and he really, really loves the land. So, at least according to his interviews.
Was he invited to come to this presentation?
Oh, he
Yes,
owns,
yes, he was. I believe it.
he owns Hat 6 Falls too, and I used to take third graders out there every year, and he's torn down the Homestead House and the buildings out there. I mean, it's paradise out there. One of the most beautiful places from around Casper Mountain, the falls. And it freezes in the wintertime like a big candle, because there are caves behind and a big pond, and that freezes, and it's just, behind the cave there's blue ice and everything, and it's so beautiful. And the people that live there and homesteaded there, one that's sort of like a youth retreat for Casper kids in trouble to come out and use their land, and that. Gordy got it somehow, and that will never be a retreat place.
Just gonna have to story this.
I've got two questions. Do you think it's possible to have a coordinated resource management plan in an area where there are so many conflicting interests?
Yes. Actually, I believe so.
I believe that it's the perfect place.
That is, I mean, that's the whole point of the CRM, is to be able to resolve these issues in a group setting regardless of how many conflicting ideas there are.
If there weren't that many conflicting ideas, there wouldn't be as heavy a need for a CRM. The idea behind the entire process is to resolve a set of issues like that, and so I think that at least theoretically it's a good idea. Now, we all know that people in Wyoming can be pretty strong-headed, strong-willed, and so that definitely plays into it too.
So it's possible to get a consensus on this then, between private landowners and the public, and between hunters and people who are doing conservation?
Yeah.
I believe so.
Also, cause they can just say no, that they won't accept it, and it can't, you have to get a consensus of all the people, but if it's a private owner, they can just say no, we're not letting you hunt on our land.
That's not a consensus, is it?
Well, they don't have to agree to the consensus.
Either way, they're going
We
to
can
collaborate
resubmit
on
it
the
1,000
matter.
times.
A consensus means everybody comes to an agreement on how it is managed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a decision-making mechanism. It's usually not like a Quaker. So you don't have votes, and you don't have a single person. You sit down, you discuss it, you reach an agreement.
Yeah.
Right, did you
Yeah.
just make a quake yourself?
But you know, it may go on for a very long time if you don't see eye to eye. That's why I'm asking, is it actually possible?
Possible, yes.
Take a long time.
Plausible, that's a good question.
Debate.
Yeah, well, I mean, okay, that's interesting. I mean,
It's only the private owners, but you get consensus between the BLM and
Yes,
all
the
the other
BLM.
areas.
In all essence, it's really up to the private landowners to be able, if they don't want to sit down and have this discussion, they won't. And
then you
that's,
won't have the consensus.
yeah, that's the simple fact of it, is that if you do not have the consensus and you do not have
You won't have
people
good
wanting to
voting.
do it, you will not have a finished product.
Things break
This is
down.
America, that land belongs to you, you can do anything you want with it.
Yeah. Anyway, but I've got my other question. You look very specifically at this particular area, the Muddy Mountain area. But presumably this is also it's ecologically and environmentally, it's linked to other parts, the surrounding area.
It's contiguous.
Yes. Did you look at that aspect? I mean, you seem to focus entirely on this little patch here. I'll give you an example.
Oh, it's big.
I worked on a conservation environmental thing in Botswana, in the Okavango swamps. And one of the problems there was that you depended on policies that were, Botswana is a country, you depended on policies that were being made in Angola and Zambia and Zimbabwe and Namibia, the surrounding areas, because the animals that you see in the Okavango, which include those things up there, elephants and zebras and giraffes and hippos and all sorts of other things, but a lot of the animals that migrate actually they spend part of their time in other countries. So you can't actually look at that management system, that little patch there, without looking at what's going on around there, because the Botswana government wants to put up fences all over the place, which stop these animals migrating and would eventually be the end of them. So did you look at that sort of wider, I only give you that as an example, did you look at the wider aspect?
In certain aspects we did. For example, a few of us took a look at the Bluegrass Festival, which takes place on Casper Mountain, and its human disturbances, for example, more humans being on the mountain. But for the wider area surrounding it, we did not focus on that. We spent our time within this little area, multiple use area.
To speak to that, we were originally looking at this specific piece of BLM land, and then we kind of looked at the contiguity around it. So on a smaller scale, we looked at like all the private plots around it. But recently, Russell provided me with some maps from not maps, graphs from the BLM, detailing the traffic counters from different spots around Muddy Mountain. And you can see that it's pretty typical that there's more access being used during the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday periods, even during the summer, than during the other days. And that's not just to Muddy Mountain, but the surrounding areas. And so as you can see, what might need to happen is limiting of not just in the Muddy Mountain area, but in the surrounding areas, access during those days to keep it at a steady access rate so that the elk aren't being dealt with a steady amount of people throughout the midweek days, and then during the weekend being exposed to so much more. So that was kind of not exactly an answer to your question,
But it's okay.
I'm not convinced that setting up a drilling rig bothers elk at all. I mean, because they get, you get out there, you set up a drilling rig, you're there for, 35 days or more.
But
The elk get used to that noise, and I've seen wild animals walk right up on location. I mean, they just get used to it.
But the thing
Humans
is,
aren't quite as
I mean, there's nobody hunting them.
presence.
so the thing is, the diesel fumes from the rig and the fact that you have to flatten out that location and remove all the plants that are there already.
That's one acre out of how many?
Yeah, that's still disturbing the ecosystem. Maybe not to a large extent, but
Right.
it is making animals go away from that area due to the 3,000 horsepower diesel engines running 24 hours a day, and the fact that
They're
there's
not there that long.
yeah, but still,
Also-
30 to 35 days, they're not going to come back to that area for maybe 2 months
Yeah.
after that until they're convinced that that sound has gone away completely.
Also, because
Or
there's
in another sense, they're
fragmentation.
scared to crap this.
There,
Uh,
alright, so the elk
I
person
mean,
from
there's
the
not been no drilling in oil activity in this area, why would you even mention that?
Because sounds
our-
and noises can also disturb the animals and the elk, and it can either be permanent or it could be temporary.
The person who came and spoke to us about elk from the Game and Fish gave a presentation which she'd actually given to some oil rig workers,
Right.
and she had to explain to them that the elk are extremely sensitive. They would hear someone
Absolutely,
several
yeah.
1 to 2 miles away actually, and move away from the area where they were. So that little piece, that 1 acre plot, can actually affect a pretty wide area. But also, the human element of it makes it very difficult because there are some people, and I don't want to generalize because I know plenty of people who work in the oil fields and are incredibly mature and very well-behaved people, but she said that some of these people had been going off and they had been rousing the elk and chasing them with ATVs and things. So the human element can also have a negative effect on the elk.
Just depends. How courageous are you?
Russell.
Yeah, Jacob, I've got one for you specifically. the video that we saw out here, now I'm forgetting which guest speaker it was that showed it to us, but there was the large herd of elk running around. And those were all on Gordy's land, were they not?
Yeah, they were.
Okay, and so why, there are some people that might support what Gordy is doing in gathering these pieces of land. Why would somebody say that what he's doing is a good idea?
Because they don't have a big brain.
Because he's allowing natural causes to happen. He's not really interfering with natural causes. He's letting the animals do as they will, so they're more in a natural and pristine environment.
He's publicly promised several newspapers that he will never develop certain pieces of land, so.
That and he's making contiguous habitat for the animals. For example, he just collected, I think in 2010, he bought out the Boston Davis Ranch, which is that's a prime hunting area on Muddy Mountain. And I'm not sure if he said he's going to develop it or not, but still, he's not doing anything to that area currently, and those elk are just fine where they are.
So he did buy that. Where is that, where it showed his land? Is that part of it, or where is the Boston?
The Boston Davis Ranch, I'm not sure exactly where it is, but his land is mostly this southeast area around this.
And there's a better map.
There's a better map right there. That's the white. The white is his.
Well, where's the Boston? Yeah, but I wonder what part was the Boston that he bought out.
Everywhere I read, all it would say is south of Casper.
Yeah, south of Casper.
So
it wouldn't tell you the exact area. I couldn't tell you the
And
exact
he got
area.
that too? I didn't think that was finalized yet. Right.
Nope, it happened.
You know, there are Angus cows over there too, where I hiked with another grandson recently, and there are a lot of Angus cows down there. That must be Gordy's then, I think, on the
Possibly,
eastern side. And then there is, like, somebody planted Christmas trees, the most beautiful pine trees that were just a little bit taller than us, but we got lost in the maze of them because there were so many of them in one area, and how they came up all in one place that are just beautiful new trees. And if that's his land we were on, we walked over his land. He didn't catch us, thank heaven.
You were sneaky.
Any further questions?
Any got another one?
Russell?
We went up to Muddy Mountain a couple times. Deanna, can you speak to some of the pieces of fragmentation that you saw when we were up there just for the day? I know you only went up a couple times, but can you tell us a little bit about the evidence of fragmentation that you saw on Muddy Mountain?
Some of the evidence that I saw for the fragmentation is, well, we went and we drove over by a little campsite, and in the fire pit were a whole bunch of like beer bottles and beer cans, and it was fragmented, and there was just a whole bunch of things cut down over there, and there really wasn't much for the elk to eat right over in that area because a human had gone over there and fragmented.
100 bullet shells in the ground.
Yeah, and the bullet shells.
Adam, did you have something else as well?
Yes, also, so there's a main road, but there's also been a lot of roads that are not technically supposed to be there, that have been, they made large ruts in the ground where plants can't grow, and when it rains, it pretty much becomes a mud pit.
Two tracks.
Yep, the two-track roads.
Also, added to what Deanna said, when she observed the area seeing littered and a lot of other lands being torn up, I've also noticed that on trees that Mr. Russell, you were talking about, is that they had ribbons on them, like blue and orange. Like, I believe the blue ones are to be cut down and the orange ones to be kept. And so it made me wonder, they both look the same, but it's either one's more dead than the other one, or one's more alive. That's how I saw it.
Also, the ribbons indicate whether they have bark beetles or a type of disease such as mistletoe, which is not the ones that you hang over doors.
It kills trees and makes stuff.
It actually deforms them, so it'll split the tree into like two parts.
I was just curious about something. I don't know if it's on the Muddy Mountain portion or not, but it's where everybody goes out and shoots. And I don't know if that's private land or BLM.
That's
or why that's allowed to just people to dump their trash out there and their bullet shells.
You mean where there's all
and
those,
their-
the TVs, the refrigerators, just
Yeah,
on
it's
that
not
side of
one
that hill?
spot, it's the whole area out there.
Yeah,
And I'm going, how is that allowed to happen?
I'm
And
not-
then is that didn't know if that was part of the Mighty Mountain.
yeah, I'm fairly sure
area.
that's state land, because I do not think
Okay.
a private landowner would let that happen
Yeah,
to
I
his
just don't know
land.
how that
That
was.
was
And it's
gonna
right
say
next to the
it's
road,
America.
so.
That may be a discussion for another day.
Any more questions?
Especially Russell Gordy, he could say one thing and shotgun behind everything.
Questions, anybody got a question?
All right, well,
Thank you for coming to our meeting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.